in it, and then we'll know whether or not it's something we can handle or if we'll need to contract it out.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Neal. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public safety meets in 1 minute.
What's the hurry? What's the hurry?
Thanks, Bob.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and move forward with our public safety meeting. We have myself, Swirsky, Sims, and Hoke in attendance. And we did have a meeting last week. Can I get approval of those minutes, please?
So moved.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We do have 2 new pieces in front of us today. And our first one is number 9, ordinance 2018, authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for and enter into an agreement for funding through the Road to Zero initiative administered by the National Safety Council to secure funding for overtime and to purchase speed enforcement equipment and declare an emergency. And we have Deputy Mayor of Public Safety Charles Brown, Chief Ball with us today.
Good afternoon. I'd also like to introduce our law enforcement planner Carol McCullough, and she's going to address
Welcome,
this.
Carol. Thank you.
So this is
Thank you.
So this is essentially an opportunity that we found that would allow us to apply for both overtime hours specifically for speed enforcement, as well as supplies and equipment that are related to traffic safety. The funder, which is focused on traffic fatalities and reducing them, is looking for anything that we can do to address speeding, and that could be environmental, but that could also be enforcement, and enforcement is what the police department's all about, so that's what we applied for. It would include 1,000 hours of overtime. This is assuming that we received this grant, that would allow for 5 hours of radar enforcement 5 days a week, for 40 weeks, which are the primary weeks when one would do that. When it's pretty icy out, they wouldn't be doing that. It would also allow us to apply for LED flares, collapsible traffic cones, 10 handheld radar units, and 5 handheld LiDAR units, 2 different methods of registering how fast someone is going. It would also allow us to potentially purchase truck scales because we have not been doing commercial enforcement, commercial vehicle weight enforcement for some time. Obviously, the potholes in the city, amongst other things, as well as safety of the public that are out on the roads. It would also allow us to purchase what's called a GPS total station to allow us to better analyze accidents when they occur and ideally try to prevent them in the future. And similarly, it would allow us to purchase a tool called a CDR2 tool, which is a crash data retrieval unit that we can use to analyze what happened in the car. It connects to the computer in the car. Does anyone have any questions? Or this is my first time doing this, so if I didn't cover something, let me know.
Carol, you did a good job. You did a great job. No, thank you. Everything you said, I support. I hope we get this grant. Wow, I love it. Truck scales. Right now, as a council person in Ward 7, I'm getting just hammered with phone calls with Archwood being used with truck traffic. I've sent out 3 letters to the State Highway Patrol to see if I can get help from them because of the ODOT project. So thank you. No, you did a great job, and you explained it good. So any questions for Carol and the others? Mrs. Sims?
I thought you did a great job too, Carol. Just a quick question on how does the commercial truck, the scales work? How does that work?
They are digital scales. We have to purchase 16 of them, 1 for each wheel, and it would basically be a similar sort of situation where we would set up you know, I've seen a number of these stations, the weigh stations, that are simply abandoned currently. So we would need to set up at one of those locations with these. They're small and portable, which is much different than they've been in the past. We have commercial truck scales that we haven't used for approximately 8 years because they've been broken. And they're also somewhat obsolescent, so trying to get them fixed didn't make a great deal of sense. Truck scales are pretty expensive. This grant is asking for $80,000 specifically for the truck scales. So that's how that would work. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So we would really technically only have 1 set of truck scales.
Correct.
Scales. In my head, I was thinking maybe there's some kind of technology that in those high traffic areas like a Archwood or like a Arlington or like a Copley Road or whatever, that there would be some, no, I don't see many trucks on Copley Road actually, but that there would be some mechanism that's right there. You know, how you do the traffic count, so that's not what we have.
If that exists, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good question, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Swirsky?
Yeah, just thank you for recognizing that speeding is such a pervasive problem in our city, and for moving competently and professionally to address that problem, in the use of technology applied in a smart and realistic way. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Swirsky. This is like a wish list for the whole committee, I think. I like it. Any other comments or questions? Chief, yes.
And I just want to add that this is in addition to the steps that we've also decided to take internally to address some of the complaints that have come to council about the lack of traffic or speed enforcement in our neighborhoods. So I had spoken to Councilperson Keith last week, and I know that some of that information had been forwarded to you all, but I wanted to reassure you that this is in addition to what we've already committed to, 12 hours in our neighborhoods, rotating the wards of traffic enforcement 5 days a week.
No, I appreciate that, and she did forward that email, and I mean, I'll briefly talk about it now instead of the budget hearing, but no, I support that 100%, and if anybody out, I'd rather get a phone call from somebody that's going to get a 55, or a ticket going 55 and a 25 than from the mom and dads, the parents that are out there walking their babies, trying to teach their little kids how to ride a bicycle and stuff like that, and you got someone that's flying down a residential street at 55, seriously, 55, 60 miles an hour in a 25. So I want to thank you, Deputy Mayor Charles Brown, and of course, Money over there, Diane Dawson, thank you too, I appreciate it. So, like I said, anybody that wants to get upset over getting a ticket for going 50 and a 25, you tell them call me, because I'd rather talk to them about that than talk to the mom and dads and the senior citizens out there about speeding vehicles. So, Mr. Swirsky.
I also share Downey's enthusiasm for what you're doing. Can you just explain each ward will get how many hours of increased speeding service?
Is this with regards
I think you said it in the email. I think you had put it in the email, but so each ward will see traffic. What will this mean for each of our wards?
We will have 4 shifts, or 3 shifts a day of 4 hours each that will be in separate wards. So it'll be the rotation. So, 3 separate wards, and those will be morning, early afternoon, and late afternoon enforcement, and we'll just continue to rotate those through the areas. The traffic commander will be soliciting each of you for the highest areas that you've received complaints for, and we will prioritize those. You can also talk to your zone commanders about the specific problems that you're having. If those change while we're out there, and once the enforcement starts, when we begin to have an impact in specific areas and see some improvement, then at your request, we'll consider those next areas where we might be having some problems too. So we'll have a total of 15 separate shifts, so you should see at least twice a week, or approximately twice a week, somebody in your ward for at least 4-hour periods dedicated to speed enforcement.
Good. Thank
Excellent.
you, Mr. Swirsky. Thank you, Chief. Mrs. Sims?
I think, just for point of clarity, when you were presenting, you mentioned, you made a reference to almost seasonal, like ice and snow. Is this grant season, or are we looking at something we can use this?
It's to cover a year. In working with the folks that are part of our traffic bureau, they indicated that typically they don't end up doing radar, LiDAR type activities whenever there's a pretty heavy snow and ice, because people are already going slow as a result of that. I think they're probably tied up with accidents at that time. So it does cover a year, but in terms of the way that we broke out 1,000 hours, we did it 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 40 weeks, rather than 52 weeks.
Okay, just not really looking at when it's winter. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Sims, go ahead and make a motion to suspend the rules on this. Can I get a second, please? Hoke, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Carol, thanks again for coming down to council. Good job. I don't know if you're staying for the second piece, but we'll... right on to our next and final piece, ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for and enter into an agreement for funding from the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation to purchase of 40 ballistic helmets to outfit each member of the Akron Police Department SWAT team and declare an emergency.
Okay.
Brown?
Go ahead, Carol.
So this one specifically focuses on equipment that is life-protecting, and for our SWAT team, which has 40 members, 16 of the helmets that they currently use are already expired. 24 are rapidly approaching expiration, so we were looking to try and get new helmets. This would be supplemental to any other funding that we have for equipment like this, should we get this grant. But it is focused very simply on helmets that we have thoroughly researched to find ones that both work with our communication systems well, have great usability in terms of have places for one to put lights and that sort of thing, and of course are rated highly in terms of protecting individuals. Anybody have any questions about this one?
Thank you. Any questions? Mrs. Sims?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few months back, I think, we got a grant from a foundation to buy similar equipment. Is this in addition to?
That was, Mr. Sims, that was for the fire department.
This,
That was for vests.
I thought it was
I think it was
EMS.
vest, it was EMS, so it would be for EMS and fire, or actually just EMS, not fire.
So we didn't get anything for SWAT team. I thought we got stuff for SWAT team.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Sims. Just to clarify from my memory, those 40 vests, we do have them, or that was just a grant, right?
We have monies from issue 4 for vests for the SWAT team, so there may have been a confusion, or the ones that were previously approved for tactical helmets, those were for our SWAT paramedics that now have a part of our tactical team that are closer to the hot zones and need to have that kind of protection. So that those two items previously had been approved: new vests for our SWAT team, new tactical or new helmets for our SWAT tactical medics, and now this is for our SWAT team.
Okay. Okay. Got it? Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Somerville, yes.
Thank you so much. Just one quick question. I know that you said some of the helmets are getting ready to expire. What is the life on the helmets?
The helmets that we currently have a lifetime of 5 years. The helmets that we want to procure would be 10 years, so they would have
Very
an
good.
extended lifetime.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Somerville. Any other questions or comments? What are your wishes for this piece, Mr. Brown?
Consent decree. Agenda, I'm sorry, consent
What'd you
agenda. It's been a long day.
He's been working with me on the
It's only a lot of people behind me. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
He's been working with me on the procedures.
That's good. He says consent agenda is
Motion for
okay.
consent.
We got a motion from Ms. Sims. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, thank you. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, ma'am. Schweigert. Schweigert. Yep. Sure.
it worked, okay.
So red means go?
Yeah, no, just have a seat. I'll introduce you. Okay.
That's all. Okay.
Honest forward and toward us.
I'd like to call the Health and Social Services Committee to order, please. May I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting?
Second.
All in favor? The minutes are approved. We'd like to thank our guests for coming. I'll read the ordinance in, and then I'll allow, I don't know, Ms. Tamika Rose, are you going to do the introductions, or Mr. Hardy?
Yes, I will do the introductions.
Let me read this and then we'll do that. Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much. This is our ordinance offered by Mayor Horgan and myself. Ordinance amending and supplementing Title 13 General Offenses, Chapter 130 General Provisions, Section 130.02 Definitions, and Title 13 General Offenses. Chapter 139 Miscellaneous, Section 139.09 Illegal Distribution of Cigarettes or Other Tobacco Products of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Akron to prohibit the sale of cigarettes, other tobacco products, and tobacco product paraphernalia to individuals under the age of 21, authorizing a contract with the Summit County Combined General Health District to implement these provisions through regulations and declaring an emergency. We are very fortunate today to have an excellent panel of experts to be with us today to talk about this ordinance. I've been doing research myself, and I'm sure I'm not going to take your thunder away, but I'll allow you. But we certainly thank Mrs. Tamika Rose, our Health Equity Ambassador, for all the work that she's done, along with Corey and a number of other folks. So, I don't know, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Rose to introduce the panel, and then I'll allow you to go from there.
Thank you. I just wanted to give the committee a little bit of background of how this came. So as you all know, that everyone asked me, what is health equity? I wanted to thank you guys first for letting us come here today as well. But what is health equity? Health equity means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be healthy as possible. This requires removing obstacles to health, such as poverty, discrimination, and their consequences, including powerlessness and lack of access to good jobs and fair pay, quality education, housing, safe environments, social inequities, and health care. Mayor Horgan hired me to improve the health equity in Akron. The one clear way to measure that effectiveness is the infant mortality rate in Akron. The infant mortality rate is not going to decrease overnight, but through well thought out strategies and change in policies, I am hopeful that in 5 to 10 years we can see a true decrease in infant mortality, and that Akron will be a city that people point to on how to tackle not only infant mortality but inequity as well. In looking at the effective strategies to reduce infant mortality, smoking by young expectant mothers was a key risk factor that we needed to target. Looking at the data, it is clear that increasing the tobacco sales age to 21 could meaningfully reduce low birth weight, prematurity, and infant mortality rates, and improve lifelong health outcomes for today's youth. The legislation that Mayor Horgan and Councilwoman Amobian have introduced today prohibits the sale of any tobacco product to anyone under the age of 21. So it prohibits the sale of tobacco, so that prohibits retailers to sell it to individuals. It's not going to criminalize those people that purchase it. So it's trying to help have the retailers on our side. So in an effort to allow you to hear the compelling data that helped me make this decision for yourselves, we have Donna Skota, the health commissioner here. Corey Kendrick is the director of population health, along with Dr. Dunn from SUMA and Dr. Schweiger, from Cleveland Clinic, Akron General, to testify on the benefits of increasing the age for persons to purchase tobacco products at the age of 21. So I'm going to turn it over to Corey and Donna right now.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's exciting. What we want to do is talk to you about T21 and basically why we're here, and give you some information. Basically, we have known for many years, and the research is, that we get far more bang for our buck if we're able to change policy and not concentrate as much on individual behavior. Now, it doesn't mean that giving counseling to folks or having educational or seeing your physician isn't good for you. It is. But when you can change the environment in which people live, where you force the default choice to be the easy choice, you make huge strides in improving population health. I mean, we often quote in public health that, policy could become the new pills and procedures of the future if we have enough of that in place. And more we learn every day of the ill effects of tobacco products, many children that are subjected to homes. I mean, you look at the asthma data from Children's Hospital. Every child that's intubated is in a home where smoking is occurring. I mean, there's lots of good reasons for us to try to get folks to never start smoking. And what it tells you is when children start young, they're going to be adult smokers. I'm sure you're going to hear from these gentlemen about what they see every day with tobacco abuse. But more and more we know the impact of tobacco, and it's criminal to not act on it and change the way people can no longer purchase it if you are a younger person. I'm old enough, and many of us are here. We remember in 2006 when Smoke-Free Ohio went through, and it was going to be the end of the world, and nobody was going to go to restaurants, and everybody was going to go bankrupt. Well, that isn't what happened. The bottom line is people go out more when they aren't exposed to secondhand smoke. And that's been 12 years now. And I can tell you, none of us will will never see in our lifetime something that will make as great impact on the health of individuals than Smoke-Free Ohio and any rule that can control the policies around tobacco abuse. And I'm going to turn it over to Corey, and he's going to talk a little bit about what exactly is T21.
Thank you, Donna. So as Donna mentioned, tobacco is a huge issue for us. Looking at our top 3 causes of death here in Summit County, cancer and heart disease constantly are fighting for number 1, unfortunately. Tobacco is a major risk factor for both of those. Followed by that, chronic respiratory disease and stroke, which is also, tobacco plays a high risk factor. So looking at the data, it is literally the number 1, contributes to a lot of causes of death here in Summit County. So Tobacco 21, well, it's currently in about 270 plus cities throughout the United States, throughout 18 states, and 5 whole states have went Tobacco 21. So the whole states have went to changing the legal age to 21 years of age. So it is starting to be a widely acceptable policy, and it's spreading quickly. This is an evidence-based program. 21 is not just a number. We didn't just pick it out of the air because it's alcohol. It's actually evidence-based. And the reason why this works is because it takes the tobacco out of the reach of high schoolers, out of the social circle. So really who we're trying to stop from smoking are not 18 to 20-year-olds, but 14 to 18-year-olds, because that's often when people first try their first cigarette. And so research has shown if we can change the age of 21, most high schoolers do not have someone that age in their social circle, and it makes them harder to get the tobacco product. It's also easier for retailers to identify people who are 21 years of age versus 18 years of age or 17 years of age. So looking at this evidence-based program, one of the strongest pieces of evidence comes from Needham, Massachusetts. And they were one of the first to adopt this law, and they did a youth risk behavior survey over the next 3 years after this law was passed. In 3 years, the youth adoption rate of tobacco was cut in half. The surrounding communities that did not pass this ordinance saw a little bit of a gain, but nowhere near the gain of Needham. So if you have the PowerPoint presentation, you can see the chart of the major difference of the smoking rates for youth in Needham versus the surrounding Metro West communities. Youth tobacco risk of high school and middle school students have used cigarettes, 16%, 7.6% smokeless tobacco, and 37% of them purchase it at a retail tobacco establishment. So they're able to buy these products from retail. Ohio currently ranks 46th overall in tobacco policies according to the Health Policy Institute of Ohio. And what's even more alarming in tobacco right now is the vaping usage. We don't have great data on this right now, but our next youth risk behavior survey, which will be coming out administered this fall to the high schools, will include detailed usage on vaping and e-cigarette products. But we do know we've surveyed a local high school and that 36% of students have tried vaping. And 27% have tried a cigarette at least once, but not regularly. So we're finding that vaping is becoming actually more popular in use than cigarettes. And the research is showing that just now starting to show some negative health consequences, and also that addiction later turning into real tobacco use later in life. As Tamika mentioned earlier, there's a correlation between our pregnant mothers here in Summit County and smoking. Overall, our pregnant mothers here in Summit County are 2 times more likely to smoke than the national average. And our 18 to 21-year-old mothers are 3 times more likely to smoke than the national average. I'm just going to put this out there because this comes up quite a bit about military, and if you're old enough to serve, why can't you buy a pack of cigarettes? So the same argument was used when the alcohol law was proposed to be changed. And over that time period after that was changed, it cut the accident rate from 16 to 20-year-olds in half of alcohol-related fatality crashes. So it played a significant role in reducing those numbers. Also, the military leaders are very supportive of Tobacco 21 policies and initiatives. The Department of Defense and each armed service is committed to have a smoke-free and tobacco-free military. In fact, each branch of the service has commissioned a marketing campaign to try to get soldiers to quit. When this passed statewide in Hawaii, the military base was very supportive, and even though they did not have to, they also made the commissary on the base 21 as well to comply with the state law. Tobacco sales impact. Looking at the data, lawful cigarette purchases between 18 to 20-year-olds accounts for about 2% of sales. But we know that those 2% of sales create 90% of the new smokers. So it has a very small economic impact on lawful tobacco sales. Compliance checks. We don't have great data on compliance checks, but we know that a lot of compliance does not get done in Summit County. There's just not the time or resources. But we do know the compliance checks that are done, almost 50% of those sold to a minor. Out of the 25 checks that we were able to do, 12 locations sold to a minor. So the Tobacco 21 model, looking at Columbus as the gold standard, has 3 components. The implementation of the ordinance, which is today. Then there's a vendor registration process, which would create a list of tobacco resellers. And then that comes with enforcement and compliance, which would be the health department by doing a better compliance check, making sure that these aren't being sold to minors. But also working with the vendors to provide education and outreach. The goal is not to put anyone out of business. The goal is that we don't sell any cigarettes to 14 to 20-year-olds, so that they never have a lifelong habit to begin with. For all these reasons, our Board of Health has passed a resolution last month supporting Tobacco 21 and encouraging all municipalities within Summit County to adopt an ordinance in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we have two doctors here who have taken time away from their offices, and we certainly appreciate that. So I don't know if they want to go next.
Chairwoman Amobian and members of the Health and Social Service Committee, I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide testimony in support of Tobacco 21 legislation, which would raise the age of purchase of tobacco products from 18 to 21. I'm Dr. Robert Schweikert. I'm the Chief Cardiologist at Cleveland Clinic Akron General, and Dr. Dunn and I can both testify. I'm sure that we see people every day that are suffering from the effects of tobacco use. And as mentioned, this includes, in our world, heart attacks and adverse effects on the cardiovascular system. Tobacco use remains the single largest preventable cause of disease and premature death. It increases the risk of heart disease and stroke 2 to 4 times, and each year tobacco claims the lives of over 20,000 Ohioans and costs us over $5 billion in healthcare expenditures. As mentioned, smoking has a negative impact on birth outcomes, as smoking while pregnant can lead to low birth weight and other complications. It was already mentioned that the pregnancy smoking rate in Summit County is nearly twice the national average. Unfortunately, Ohio is on the wrong path when it comes to tobacco use. Almost 1 in 4 Ohioans are smokers, and at a time when national rates are decreasing, Ohio's rate of smoking is increasing. And we currently have about the 8th highest smoking rate in the country. We really must turn the tide on this issue. The smoking rate among high school students is also quite high. In one estimate, more than 1 in 5 high school students currently smoke, and more than 11,000 more will become daily smokers this year. And it was mentioned that the young smokers become lifelong smokers in a substantial number of cases. Big Tobacco continues its efforts to entice new generations to take up tobacco. The industry spends more than $1 million per hour, that's $8.8 billion annually, on the marketing of its products. Ad campaigns with the likes of cartoon characters have been replaced with popular sweet-flavored cigars and e-cigarettes to target younger generations. So our hope is that lawmakers will not allow this to continue. We owe it to our children and the generations that follow to provide a healthy, tobacco-free country. Our health and the economic health of our nation depends on it. Increasing the age of purchasing tobacco products in Akron and Summit County would be an extremely effective way to reduce smoking rates. We have the opportunity with Tobacco 21 legislation to turn these numbers around and move Ohio in the right direction. I am confident that these changes will result in better health for the citizens of Akron and Summit County. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I'm certainly willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you, Dr. Schweikert. Thank you, Chairwoman Amobian, for the opportunity to speak today and testify in support of this legislation to raise the legal purchasing age of tobacco from 18 to 21. My name is Dr. Justin Dunn. I'm an interventional cardiologist in Summa Health's Cardiovascular Institute, and I'm the president-elect of our local American Heart Association. I see the damage smoking inflicts on the human body every single day. Smoking accelerates the process of atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries, through multiple different mechanisms, including increasing triglyceride levels, decreasing levels of HDL, or good cholesterol, and increasing harmful inflammation in the blood vessels. It significantly increases the risk of heart attack and stroke, making arteries unstable and more susceptible to acute events. Smoking increases blood pressure over time through hardening of the arteries, but every time a person smokes, their blood pressure transiently increases by 5 to 10 millimeters of mercury, increasing the workload of the heart with each cigarette. Smoking induces a hypercoagulable state, increasing the risk of clot formation in blood vessels throughout the body, such as the heart and brain, as well as other vessels in the body, leading to heart attacks, strokes, and forming clots in the lower extremities, which can lead to amputations. Many of the adverse effects of smoking are secondary to additives and toxins, but many are secondary to nicotine itself, an important consideration when discussing non-cigarette tobacco products and e-cigarettes. Recent data has shown that even one cigarette a day has harmful cardiovascular effects. Smoking, as you have heard, is the #1 cause of preventable death in the United States. Nicotine is extremely addictive, and once patients have started smoking, it is very difficult to quit. Many patients continue to smoke despite a full understanding, an admitted full understanding, of the medical and financial harms of cigarettes. I often tell my patients that the best thing they can do for their health moving forward is to quit smoking. Given the harmful effects of tobacco use and the powerful addictiveness of nicotine, measures to prevent the initiation of tobacco use are imperative. In addition to the harmful medical effects, we know that tobacco use is a major cost driver of healthcare expenditures, which in turn drives up healthcare expenditures for all of us. Research has shown, as you have heard, that people who have not used tobacco by age 21 are unlikely to ever start. Preventing our children from picking up a smoking habit can materially change the collective health and well-being of the next generation of Summit County residents. Thus, I urge you to pass this legislation. Thank you again for your time and attention today on this very important topic.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hardy, did you? I can only tell you that I certainly appreciate this. I did a little research myself on this, and I think you've already alluded to the fact that even the Military Readiness Force is starting a campaign against smoking. And I know, Donna, when you talked about when people don't have the internal strength to do something, it's the external, the environment that we can change. I didn't realize what clear air was about until they stopped allowing people to smoke in public places. And then when you start breathing that, it's so different. And to imagine that going into someone's body, especially at a young age when there's still brains and things are still developing. So with that, committee members, if you have questions, please. And Mr. Bekovich.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the panel for coming in today. You guys really gave a lot of statistics, and I appreciate that. I'd like to speak from my own personal life. I was one of those folks that you said that started at a young age as a teenager. It was one of the hardest things I had to do in life was quit smoking. It's been about 20 years since my last cigarette. I know some people who are like social smokers, they can have like one or two and put it down. Unfortunately, I was not one of those. You mentioned, is there a socioeconomic, do you guys have any studies versus poor people versus more affluent people, the percentage of people who smoke?
I mean, if you look at data, it's not so much a poor or rich kind of thing, it's less educated. Yeah, and that's where you see the real divide. People that are less educated, have less formal education, tend to smoke more.
Did you want to continue?
Yes, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, if we raise the age to age of 21, would we be creating like a black market for cigarettes for those who are under age 21?
There hasn't been any evidence of that thus far. With the 270 communities that have done this, that hasn't came out yet. You know, never say never, but it doesn't seem to be the issue as of right now.
You know, one of the things happened today. I was talking to someone who apparently did an unofficial survey of some young people who thought T21 was a good thing. They said they know that the tobacco companies are targeting young people, so they thought that was a good thing for them to, for us to raise the age. So now that we have this legislation, how do we move forward? Because I know that in Columbus, I spoke with them. Oh, just a moment. Oh, I'm sorry, just a moment. I spoke with the legislative aide in Columbus, and she was telling me about this huge education campaign that they conducted before they put the penalties in place and all of that. So we'll get to that. I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Chairwoman Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple of questions. I feel a little intimidated by all the doctors up in here, but on a serious note, I'm challenged at the same time. I understand what seems very paternalistic to me in the approach. I know how important education is, and it just seems like there has to be or should be a better way. And to my brother's point, who asked the question about the disparities in terms of potentially race, when you say education, I mean, that brings me to that. There is an issue of race, and no matter how we try to sidestep it. My concern is, as an 18, 19, and 20-year-old here in America, 17 in Ohio, I can marry, I can have a baby, I can go to the military, I can bury my children. So that, I'm challenged by then saying at 21, you can't make a choice. I too am a former smoker. It's so much for education. I was actually pregnant and smoked with my child. I'm no longer a smoker, so and I know how difficult that challenge is. In the legislation, there was a piece that talked about 270 cities. How many cities do we have in the country?
I know the NLC has 19,000 that are members. I'm sure there's a huge number. I don't know. Does anybody have that number?
So we're talking 270 cities out of how many cities who are passing this guy? And so it's hard to really talk about whether there's a creation of a black market if it's a small number. So I guess that's my question. On the other piece, there was a piece of the legislation that talked about 2016, 30 babies lost before the age of 1. Do you know what percentage of those were a direct result of smoking?
So I cannot tell you a direct percentage. I can get that for you later, but I can tell you that in sitting on the Child Fatality Review Board and the Fetal Infant Mortality Review Board, most, I cannot say but 90% of the cases that come before us that are preterm birth, the mother smoked. So the mom smoking the year before she becomes pregnant, and during her time of pregnancy, she has a low birth weight child or a preterm birth baby. So the placenta ruptures and things of that nature. So it does cause harm to the baby.
Doc, you mentioned we're the 8th highest smoking rate in the country in Ohio. Is that for teen smoking, or is that just for smoking in general?
I believe that's smoking overall.
Okay. So, although my heart hears the need to do something, where I'm most challenged is what is it that we need to do? When we look at drug addictions, we look at a whole bunch of other addictions, we know that people self-medicate. And so smoking is one of those things. People do it because they're stressed. Well, I'm not making excuses for why people smoke. I know they do. And I would be concerned about the creation of a black market for cigarette sales. Finally, and I know we don't have law enforcement here, at some point we got to enforce the law if we make it illegal, right? So what's the potential of bringing young folks in the criminal justice system at 18, 19, and 20 years old for smoking,
so
for vaping?
I apologize. This legislation would not criminalize the use of tobacco from 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. All it does is it enforces, if you have the legislation on page 3, it actually says that the Whoever violates this section shall be subject to a fine, and it would be a civil fine, and the fine will be imposed upon the retailer that sells the cigarettes or tobacco. It would not be imposed upon the person that's smoking. And the civil fine would be given to them by Summit County Public Health, and the first fine is $500, and the second fine and those thereafter will be $1,000. And that would be the funds. I will let Corey talk about what the funds will be used for, but it is not a criminal justice fine. It is only civil penalties towards the retailer.
So those funds, what we were looking at was reinvesting that into enforcement and education to further keep people from smoking, if any funds were collected.
Enforcement.
Yes. So like secret shopper type enforcement. So right now we have about 460 tobacco retailers in Summit County, out of which a very, very small handful, probably under 50, have been checked for compliance. What we would be doing is a lot more looking at, after the education process went out, we would then be able to do some secret shopping and to find out if anyone is selling. And then that's how those fines would be assessed.
Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to respond myself and reiterate a few points. Some of the same concerns were brought up in New York City when New York was the first city to go to a smoke-free public space policy. As Commissioner Skoda noted, there were people who thought this is unenforceable, it will shut down New York's restaurant scene. Not only did they become the first city, they became the model city, and now we have states all over the union that have passed smoke-free policies. So being first, or among the first, I actually accept that as a badge of honor versus being concerned about that. The other big piece of this is that public health for the last, gosh, Donna, 25 years has been trying to intervene through education. And honestly, my generation of public health practitioners has come to the conclusion that that hasn't worked. It's policy change that really is where you see the biggest bang for your buck, as Donna said. And so it's things like T21 that show the dramatic change in health outcomes that we all wish to see. And then to Tamika's point, we had in Summit County in 2016 the single largest preterm birth rate in the state of Ohio. And from all the data, we don't need any more data, the data's in. The #1 risk factor for that, it was obesity and smoking. Those two were linked together. So today you have legislation that's really trying to tackle one of our biggest obstacles to changing the game on infant mortality, beyond just the chronic disease burden that the doctors have spoken to, which that's a whole other piece of the game. But I can tell you, I know my kids aren't going to be ready to make great choices at 18. I pray that they're ready to make good choices. But the medical journals will all tell you that we don't stop growing until we get to age 25, 26, and all of those. And just because we might have made a cutoff at 18 doesn't mean that that was the best policy going forward. We have new science, we have new data, we should reflect that. And to the points being made, I think it was either Tamika or Corey, this is about making sure our kids never start. That doesn't mean we're going to stop trying to intervene on folks that are already smoking. But if we can create a generation where half of them who would have smoked never started, the impacts on our local economy in a positive light, but also local health, are almost immeasurable. But we won't see those until we start to change the policy environment.
Mr. Fusco, please.
Thank you, Chair. Applaud everyone's efforts, Ms. Rose. Excellent job on this particular thing. And just to echo, thinking the same thing, whenever we're younger, not all of us make the best choices in terms of smoking. Thank goodness a support system that allowed me to stop myself. But it does seem like and that's the thing I like the most about this, is that it does seem as though younger folks are more, they gravitate toward doing this. And as we get older, a little bit more mature, we kind of figure it out, and it's not the best thing. My question, though, is, and forgive me if it was already covered, but under the piece, the very end here, F, under letter F here, I don't know what the number is, but 139.09F, and this is speaking to, the relationship with regards to the health district. Curious, what that all kind of means. That's number one. And then number two, you hear like what's going on with regards to, because people can go, and we'd encourage you all to carry this into Barberton, Cuyahoga Falls, our neighbors, because it wouldn't take much for young ones just to kind of cross the borderline here to go into other areas. So if you could, those are the two questions I kind of have wrapped into one, I guess.
So this is modeled somewhat after Columbus, City of Columbus's, and what they did is they authorized the authority for the health department to do the enforcement. And the reason why it makes a lot of sense is because we have sanitarians who are already going to these establishments. Even if they just sell a gallon of milk, we have to inspect them for some level of a food license. So we're already at these facilities, and so we can do the inspection of these facilities, and we're already there, so we can do it at a very low cost. So it just makes sense from a cost standpoint, and then also from the health standpoint, this is something that obviously we're feel very strongly about. And what was the second question?
The second piece would be, and maybe it's covered underneath here, because I noticed that you're talking about the health district itself. So in terms of Barberton, Cuyahoga Falls, surrounding
as far
areas.
As the surrounding communities, well, we've definitely been in talk with all the surrounding communities. We've presented to the Township Association and with other mayors around the municipalities. There's a very strong interest thus far, and I think this has the opportunity to be the trendsetter, and from there, I can envision this spreading very quickly.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks.
I can only tell you that in Columbus, after they passed their legislation, Bexley, Upper Arlington, Grandview Heights, New Albany, those are surrounding cities, and they passed legislation as well. And this may not be the end of the list. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming in to share. My one concern is, in communities where we already have the issue of concern of them selling single cigarettes and things of that nature, is again just the making sure that the inspections take place, and then that the enforcement takes place, and that it be real purposeful. Because right now the problem is, and this is going to all be done through the health side, I guess, if I heard you correctly, not through...
Yes, this will all be done through the health department, yes.
Okay. Because I don't know if the health department gets involved when we hear about people selling singles, but there's never enough people to help enforce that. So,
well, we would definitely have, again, more resources, because we're already at those establishments for other reasons. And so talking with our environmental health folks who would be out there doing these inspections, we're thinking that we could easily make sure we get at least one full secret shop in for all vendors every 3 years. But also on a complaint basis, if we know this is being done, we can target those areas. So it should have significantly stronger resources than what we currently are seeing right now, which is a very small handful of tobacco resellers.
okay. And then I think just like with the infant mortality piece, it's a community culture change that has to take place, because it does no good to prevent a child and they go home and they're in a home that's filled with people that are smoking. And so as my colleagues speak about how they quit at an early age, I can remember distinctly the campaigns that came into the schools that prevented me from even wanting to start. But I was fortunate to have a peer group that wasn't, even though folks in my family, I think at that time my parents still smoked. So I say that to say, I don't know how we are going to market this, but I would not think that the traditional, get some big marketing firm and give them the dollars. With our schools doing project-based learning now, and they're putting together campaigns, and we see on a national level how young people know how to get their message out, I would really take this to the community as a way of getting this message out and working with the young people and empowering them. One, I think I know it will make the dollars go a lot further, and you'll actually be able to measure it a lot better. So I just want to say thank you, and any way I can tie this into just the whole wellness concept that's taking place in my ward, I'd like to do that, because it has to be a total community culture shift. So thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to come to you, Mrs. Swirsky. I just want to mention that several years ago, when I joined Junior League of Akron, we used to do the secret shopping. We would go into the store with a young person, and I'll go one way, and the kid will go another way, to do this kind of thing, just to find out they were going to sell cigarettes to these kids. And I know that there will be a number of organizations that will probably partner with us to help us do this once we kind of get the word out that we want to embark on this campaign, because I think everybody can see the benefit of this. Mr. Swirsky.
Okay. Well, my daughter is currently engaged in a smoking cessation program at University Hospital, and every day she's interviewing and counseling smokers, and so she's learned a little bit about habits and practices, and she was really excited about and really proud of Akron for considering this legislation and urged that we pass it. One of the points that she brought up was that in interacting with people every day and trying to get at their habits and how they change, is that young kids often have access to 18-year-olds to buy cigarettes for them. And she pointed out that it's harder for them to get a 21-year-old to have access to talk with and get them to buy cigarettes. So I could see that advantage and that benefit coming from your legislation. And I know as an educator, we are often asked to keep up with, through our teaching techniques, to keep up with the recent brain research, and because the scanning has just gotten so good that we really understand what's happening with the human brain and the development. That's why I was so glad that Mr. Hardy brought this up. But I think the government has to react the way education is. New research is showing that decision-making really improves between the age of 21, particularly with males. I think some of you guys probably know this. But so I see us recognizing this research and this new understanding, or as Mr. Neal called it, getting into the culture, and really needing to lower, to raise the limit to 21. It matches a lot more what we know about how the human brain in development works. So thank you for your efforts.
Mrs. Moses Samples, and then.
Thank you. So I'm more interested in the enforcement component, which I really don't see a lot of that in here unless I'm missing something. I understand you said the public health department would probably do some enforcement, but wouldn't that fall under like ATF if we're talking about tobacco? And how do you really send a secret shopper into some of these corner stores to try to see if they're selling to kids, or if a person gets pulled over and they're smoking a cigarette and they're 19, and they say, well, I got it from the corner store. Are we now going into every corner store trying to figure out where they got a cigarette from? I just want to see something a little more concrete and intentional about how do we really enforce that, so we're not just penalizing corner stores assuming that they're the ones selling a cigarette to someone under 21. I don't know how, I don't know the numbers on the infant mortality and how much it affects them, but I would really like to see those numbers. As someone who had a preterm child, I didn't smoke and I wasn't obese, so I really want to see those numbers to see how it's really affecting someone having a premature child. Thank you.
From the enforcement aspect, the Board of Health will have to revise our code. Once an ordinance is created that gives us the authority to do so, our board will have to then present basically the enforcement process. And the process is not to, track down people if they were, someone bought a pack of cigarettes or anything. We obviously would have a complaint line, and we can investigate allegations of that, but it wouldn't be based on allegation alone. We would have to send a secret shopper in to verify that they were sold without, without being carded. Columbus, thus far, they sent out 2 people, one 21 or older, and then an 18 to 20-year-old. They do the buy. They have detailed forms they fill out with the buy, describing everything that happened, who sold it to them. There's actually a chain of custody form, and that's all filed away as evidence before a fine is ever assessed. Now again, it's education, so Columbus is currently the first round, just giving everyone warnings and education, and then finding this thereafter, and that's the process they're doing here. But that process would be handled by the Board of Health, as far as which then would need to be adopted through our rules and regulations through the Board of Health, which registration fees would have to go through our 3 readings at our board meetings and be adopted thereafter, granting us the authority.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with my colleagues and with the panel. Education is a big key component to this. We come a long way as a country. I remember there was a day back in the 50s where I think half the country was smoking almost, and you'd see commercials from Chesterfield, a healthy cigarette. Back in high school, class of 83 in Central Howard, where I graduated from, we had a smoking area in the school. So it's we come a long way. We got a lot more further to go. But as of saying that young people, make bad choices, I don't agree with that. I have a lot of faith in our younger generation. By law, when you're 18, you're an adult. We trust those 18-year-old adults to vote. So I have a lot of faith in them. This is coming from a former smoker. I wish I never started. It's one of the hardest things I have to do, and I just hope that we get a lot more information. And when you gentlemen said the vaping, I think that's going to be the next big concern that we're going to be talking about maybe 10 to 20 years from now, even cell phones. So I want to thank you. Thank you so much.
So, and I see my sister in the back over there. I just hope they don't kick me off the Healthy Connections Network. Because this really isn't as much as I hear you, I get kind of what you're saying. I'm concerned about some of the enforcement and the realities of where 18-year-olds find themselves today. I concur with my colleagues. They voted 18. Again, I reiterate that they get married at 17 here in Ohio. I mean, it seems like there's, again, something else that's missing that we need to be doing. It's not that I reject what you're saying as far as your findings are concerned. I am concerned about how this became a watershed moment with 270 cities when we have nearly about 20,000 in the country. I'd like, I don't know if we're making a motion or not, Madam Chair, to have just a window of time to do a little more research, because I am concerned about adverse impacts of how we police, if you will, the sale of tobacco. We know, well, how we target those places that we'll be looking at that ultimately leads to other things, and I just have some concerns and don't feel like at this moment that I've had ample time to really look into those concerns. I again reiterate, I appreciate what it is that you're saying, but it just seems like there's something missing in between time.
Well, I just I just went through watching my father die of emphysema, and I'm sure other people have other diseases that are horrible, but it was from the smoking. He was a letter carrier, he walked every day, but he couldn't overcome the smoking habits that started when he was 16. And if you've ever, watching someone die of emphysema as they slowly lose their ability to breathe, which restricts so much of life, to even not be able to taste the food they're eating. I wish some more emphysema people were here to show you that whatever concerns we have about enforcement, which are valid, we have to go back to what the problem is and what we're trying to prevent in so much of our population that became at young ages addicted to cigarettes. And even if they quit, my father did quit for 2 years, he went back. And I'm sure he's not a sole example. This is what's out there in our population. So I think whatever measures we can take, even if they're not totally perfect, whatever measures we can take to stop young people from smoking, I applaud this effort and I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to read this one statement, and then we'll move forward with a motion from one of the members of the committee. I was reading this article, and I think I may have gotten it from you, Mrs. Rose, I'm not sure, and it talks about the military readiness and all of that. But there's one statement in here, and it reflects what we've heard from the members of council who have indicated they had an addiction to the nicotine and how difficult. It said nearly 70% of adult smokers want to quit. But once a person is addicted to nicotine, it is difficult to stop, and the health consequences begin immediately and accumulate over a lifetime. And I think the doctors have spoken and have given us what they see in their practice. And there's absolutely no question in my mind that this is not a healthy practice. It hasn't been for a long time. And anything we can do to reduce the healthcare costs, the impact that it's having on young people's lives, and whether they know or not, what is cigarettes now, $5, $6 a pack? You know, absolutely unaffordable. and it's just everything that we know about it that is difficult and tough. So I thank you so very much for coming and spending your time. And we will now allow the committee, may I have a motion, please?
I can motion for time.
Second, Madam.
Okay. It's motion for time. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll take time. That doesn't mean that's the end, it's just that we'll have more information. And I'd like to mention, I think Mrs. Rose indicated that Akron Children's Hospital is also in support of this initiative, but the doctor had a full schedule of patients and couldn't come. It was Dr.
Norm Christopher, and he's able to come next week if possible.
Okay, okay. So, yes.
If I can, I just want to say this. I appreciate having this group before us, but just the overall aspect of health. I mean, when we talk about this, Mr. Fusco said that's why they sell singles at $5 a pop. But just the impact of poor health decisions and how they're impacting our community overall. You know, we're finding out so much because of our diets and what we eat, the impact. And I would love to be able for us to work with this community, this group some more, just to get more messaging out about lifestyle choices that we make. Because if we can get our community as a whole to make better lifestyle choices, the economic impact that it will have, as well as the health impact that it will have on folks. I've heard from people who have made lifestyle choices who have been able to come off of their blood pressure medicine, you know, cut their diabetes medicine, if not even come off. And when you hear of seniors who are at the point where they're spending $400, $500, $600 or more a month on medications, if we can just change lifestyle, make lifestyle choices where the community supports that and our stores start supporting that, you're talking about an economic impact that I don't even think we can measure right now. So I appreciate us discussing this small point, but there's so much more that could really impact our community just through better choices, healthy choices. So thank you for, again, for coming. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else to come before the committee? If not, may I have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Excuse me, Donna wanted to know if you wanted something specific. She was going to try to get it for you. Donna Skoda.
Have your attention for a minute. If there's any press here, feel free to go over to conference room number 1 and discuss whatever you want to discuss. And budget wherever he's at. Where's Mr.
Call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. Have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting. All in favor? All right. On our old items here, we have a resolution adopting the annual operating budget for the fiscal year 2018 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the resolution that goes along with the appropriation ordinance that we pass each year, along with the appropriation ordinance that establishes the budget.
Okay, very good. And I saw a lot of emails going back and forth. I trust everybody's had questions answered. We'd like to pass this out this evening.
Yes.
Okay. Can we have a motion on this? Mr. Neal. No, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have some questions that I hadn't received answers on. Not necessarily that it would stop the budget, but they are important to us having the being answered so that, one, we can have a better understanding going in how to prevent what caused the situation from happening the first time. The one question was regarding the cell tower allocation. During the discussion of the cell towers, we were told that we needed to pass that legislation because we had already expensed those dollars. We had already had them planned in the budget, we had already expensed them. When we got the information, my email said that the information we received was vague, and I had to question because the information we did receive showed that everything was expensed during the month of December of 2017. And it just said to payroll. It didn't give us any understanding. So one, clarification on what we were told when we were looking at the cell tower legislation, meaning that we had already expensed that?
What I said was the money was budgeted to be spent.
Okay. Well, I understood that we had to pass it because we had already spent the dollars and we would expense
No, the money was budgeted and we needed to pay expenses, is what I said.
Okay,
But
so
again,
I
I think
misunderstood
Cindy
that.
Donnell sent another document to you today that
what
may
time was
provide
it?
more details to you.
What time was that sent?
2:30, 2:40.
Or while we were in committee hearings?
No, it was today.
Yeah, 2:30, while
Okay.
we were in committee hearings. I'll take a look at that, but since she sent it, can we get explanation on what those dollars were spent on? I mean, all we got was a list that said that those dollars were spent on payroll expenses.
Okay. Again, we spent it on payroll. She did detail out payroll. I talked about payroll and benefits being the biggest expense in the general fund.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is my concern. Then, in essence, what we're saying is that last year, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of an $8 million shortfall in payroll. What's going to prevent us from having that same shortfall this year?
Again, that was budgeted, so it wasn't a shortfall. We intended to close on the cell tower leases in 2017, and that's what we did.
I understand, but it wasn't, payroll is not a, do we have?
Payroll is the biggest expense
I
in
understand.
the general fund.
I understand that. So we're going to have that same expense this year. You mean to tell me that we're going to make up an $8 million shortfall in our payroll this year? So that was my one question in regards to that. The other question that had been asked was, the dollars that had been appropriated, line item budgeted, weren't spent for that, went back to the general fund. I'd asked if we can get an understanding on how much that was for 2017, and then where those dollars were spent, because again, we had a shortfall, and I didn't get those numbers.
Yes, sir. I believe those were provided.
2 Mondays ago.
Yeah, those should have been included in the packet. So I had a listing of each of the general fund line items by each fund organization combination within the general fund, and the ones that were underspent in terms of the budget to actual.
So again, that came out last Monday.
Okay. Again, I didn't see it.
We could resend it, but it was
Okay,
sent last week.
Okay, but this is, Mr. Chairman, this is what I would ask. Every year we come and we have these concerns about understanding where dollars that were appropriated or allocated for something and then weren't spent, and they go back to the general fund. It's hard for us to follow that as council. My request would be that either one, we work where there is an unallocated line item within the general fund so that where dollars aren't spent, they go back there and come back before council for us to approve them before they are appropriated outside of how they come before us in the original budget, so that we can follow these items.
But again, every expense comes to council for approval. So it already does that.
Yeah, it may come to council for approval, but we don't understand. How many times do we say, well, where did this money come from? I mean, we did that at least 2 or 3 times this year with the money that was used to tear down Rolling Acres. With money that, now I think we ended up getting a state grant to tear down the Rubber Bowl. We asked the same question with the money.
But again, that did come to council.
I'm not saying it doesn't come to council.
Okay, I thought that's what you said.
No, but we don't understand where the money's coming from. That is the challenge. As a body that everybody comes before us to approve the budget, we don't understand where the money comes from. It'll make it easier for us to be able to track the dollars. If you come before us, give you an example. We used to get on our budget a line item that stated, when you came before us for salaries, each department within there, even if there wasn't someone in that position, we knew that that's what that money was for. We asked the question, what happened with those dollars if we don't fill that position? We don't get our budget like that anymore. So it's hard for us to follow and even track those dollars.
I think we provided both the budget documents that we went through were organized by account types of the different categories of accounts. We also provided the line item detail, which is the exact same as the information that we've provided in the past. So I think that all of that information was provided. That's not what we went through during council budget hearings, but it was all provided.
Right, but again, the question always comes back to us from this body, what happens to those dollars when they're not spent? It's hard for us, there's no way for us to track them.
Okay, but as we talked about, remember that it works both ways. So we do have line items that are underspent. We also have some that are overspent.
Correct.
So the general fund balance over the past several years has essentially been maintaining a stable balance, and which means that those underspent line items are offset by overspent line items. And therefore that fund balance has been maintaining a pretty stable balance.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I believe it would be beneficial to council if dollars that are come before us in a budget outlined for a specific item, that before they are spent in any other way, that they come back before us. And I know they come before, I'm saying that they go into an unallocated fund.
Well, keep in mind too that when we do, you are appropriating funds within each department within each fund. And that's the way the appropriation ordinances are written. When we pass amendments to the appropriation ordinances, council approves all of those. So if we're reallocating dollars from one department within a fund, or even if we're increasing or decreasing a certain fund, those are all coming before council.
That I understand, but when they come before council, and maybe I'm the only one, I can't speak for my colleagues, but we are unable to determine if those are coming from the line item as it comes before us in the original budget. Once we see the original budget, it doesn't come back before us anymore. You just say these dollars are on there as far as what's going to be spent, but we have no way of tracking, because maybe everyone else in council knew, but I sure didn't know that we were going to have an $8 million shortfall on payroll.
It wasn't 8 million.
Well, I'm saying 8 million because we had the 1.2 that came back.
But it
to us.
wasn't 8 million.
Well, I'm saying 8 million because we had 1.2 in a rebate that came back for us from workers' comp. And then we had the 6.8 million that we used from the cell towers. So that's $8 million. Because we were told that the workers' comp rebate went right back to the payroll.
Went to workers' comp fund.
Right.
That's not payroll.
To the different departments.
That's not payroll.
Doesn't workers' comp show up on your payroll?
It does, but there is a workers' comp fund. The rebate check went into the workers' comp fund.
Yes, but it's all directed to person's payroll. To a person, it shows up on your payroll check.
Any other questions or comments? Was there a motion on the floor? Is there a second?
This is on the resolution, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Folks, this is our operating budget. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I would motion that we take time till, so we can get my colleagues' questions answered.
No, I know a motion's been made for time. We've been saying for 2 weeks now. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. We've been saying for 2 weeks now. You know, ask the questions, and here we are. This is D-Day, and I've seen. I'm not sure if something's getting lost in translation here, but you know, I understand appropriations, and I know that comes before us.
You have a motion on the floor for time.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I?
So there. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question. If Finance can answer the question, if this does not pass tonight, what are the implications?
We have one more week, and if it doesn't pass next week, we'll be in violation of state law. But again, we did ask last week if we could pass it this week.
Thank you.
Okay, so there still is an original motion.
He made a motion to suspend the rule.
Yes,
Mr. Hope.
Mr. Mobian?
Yeah. Here's what I would like for us to consider. And I can consider seconding this. Is there a way that we could enter into a MOU that would say something to the effect that, because I understand what the councilman is saying, is that all of these things do come back to us, there's no question about that, but they come to us piecemeal as opposed to the whole budget. Like if you have a position in a department that you have vacant and your plan is to fill it, I'm assuming there are funds in the budget to cover that at whatever point you plan to fill that position. And then something else comes up, like the rubber bowl or whatever. We move dollars around from wherever to take care of that issue. And I think because I've asked questions myself about the whole notion of the CDBG funds, you know, where do these funds suddenly appear from? And I know that I'm always told that, you know, these are left from the funds. So I don't know if the federal funds come in, they stagger or what. But if we can have an MOU of some kind that we can meet either quarterly or some manner, and I guess this is part of what we could discuss, Madam Chair, Madam President, in the retreat that we plan to have, is how do we get our arms around this? Because I can tell you, as we go to all these meetings, these trainings, we learn that council is just as much responsible for developing the budget or working with the administration around the budget. And I know we have a different way of doing it here, but I know all of these things come back to us for approval. But if there's some way that we can have something in writing to say that we will have a discussion about things that are happening quarterly about the budget changes that are occurring, so we have a better understanding of what's happening, and we won't come to these last minute kinds of things asking, you know, all of these questions, because we have meetings kind of throughout where we can look at the total budget and and see where money is being moved and how or why. That would be my recommendation, and with that, I would second the motion to take this out of committee.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, let it be known.
I hope you got that on record, Mr. Keith.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay.
What do we have here next? I beg your pardon, I'm getting ready to go dead here. We had one other old piece, did we not? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. That's the piece for annual appropriation?
Right.
Okay. All right.
Right, just to be clear, piece 1 was the resolution, and piece 2 is the annual appropriation? Okay.
Great. So we've passed the resolution, now we're going after the appropriation. Okay, questions or comments? Is there a motion? Motion to suspend the rules. Is there a second? We have a motion, a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll pass that out this evening. And then on this third piece, this is the piece we have the substitute for. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so we'll read in the substitute. It's an ordinance amending, supplementing Title IX, General Provisions, Chapter 104, Income Tax Ordinance, in order to reflect changes improperly mandated by Ohio House Bill 49, reserving the right to continue litigating an ongoing challenge to HB 49, recognizing that several provisions may be invalidated or stayed as a result of that challenge, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these are the changes we are required to make in our income tax code in order to comply with the changes the state made from House Bill 49.
Okay. Okay, questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Amobian.
This is where they take our income dollars and...
Yeah, I think the third whereas kind of explains what's going on here. And it's like, whereas these provisions would redirect to the state a portion of Akron's municipal income tax revenue. I mean, that's the big concern that we have. Again, we've talked about the city of Akron is very good at collecting income taxes.
Right.
And we believe this is just the state imposing their will on this local jurisdiction.
And there's pending legislation, right?
There is, no, that legislation,
Group
it
of
was,
cities opposing this?
yes, litigation.
Yeah, litigation. Yeah, thank you, litigation is what I meant. Thank you.
You had rehearsed a number before. Was it half a million? What was it to the tune of?
Or if you recall what the number was that we could lose potentially?
The dollar amount that would be taken from us from the state is based upon 0.5% of the collections that we receive in this particular category of revenue. If all businesses were to opt in, it would be $90,000. $90,000. And as Diane had pointed out, we do a great job of collecting the local income tax and allowing the state to do this through these opt-in provisions would essentially take away our ability to question some of the most simple items that there are, and consequently lose a bigger pot of revenue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if time is of the essence on this?
Yes, I think we're asking for suspension of the rules.
Okay. Okay, so I'd entertain a motion to suspend the rules. And a second?
I guess we don't have a choice, so I mean, this is state law.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're being forced to do it.
One of the painful ayes. Okay, motion, a second. All in favor? Opposed? All right, we pass it out this evening. Okay, next we have an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Engaged Public for the purchase of one-year subscriptions to Balancing Act Pro, taxpayer receipt, and meeting mode software services for use by the City Council and the residents of the city and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will defer to the council members that introduce the legislation.
Okay, very good. Who do we have as sponsors? Mr. Neal, anyone else? And Mr. Milkovich as well? Okay, very good. All right, we'll defer to Mr. Neal. Mr. Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This piece is one that came before us back in July. At that time, I believe the Finance Department and some members, other members, met with Mr. Chris Smith, I think is his name, and had a demonstration. At that time, everyone had liked the software, but felt that it wasn't time. We needed to wait till the next budgeting period. This piece is before us today basically because as we've gone through this budgeting process, this is a tool that could be very beneficial to council to help us understand the budget and the impact as we as council make decisions on the city's finances, what the impact would be if we took money from Park and Rec and moved it to streets and roads as we've done before, or if we take money from parks, from police and fire and move it to take to another part of the city's budget. This is a tool that will help council perform its job. I think most people can remember when you used to get your bank statement and a piece of paper from your bank, it would be mailed to you. I think most people now go online to look at their checking account, or if you have a stock portfolio, you go online and look at your stocks and see how they perform every day. We have no way of council, we have no tool to see and keep track of the budget. You've heard the questions that we've asked before. This would be a tool for us to be able to actually start to strategically plan for the budget, to help build the reserves that haven't moved. If it hadn't been for the sale of the cell towers, they would still be at that $5 million range. So it would give us a tool to start planning. We always talk about money for the neighborhoods. The reason why everybody comes before council with their budgets is because council sets the budget. But council has yet to set a strategic plan for investing in the neighborhoods. We haven't set any money aside. So this is just a tool that would allow council to be on one page and allow us to engage with our citizens, for citizens to be able to follow their money that we're stewards of, and give us input on how they would like to see us manage it and invest it. So with that, I'll defer to my colleague.
Mr. Milkovich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and I want to concur with my colleague and friend, Mr. Neal. This empowers the taxpayers, the people who we are stewards of their money, is to get to know where they want their money spent. I think it'll be a great asset to council and to the administration as a whole. So I would respectfully ask passage. Thank you.
Mr. Neal.
One more thing I would like to share, if folks may have forgotten. Again, if we choose to purchase this package, it would cost us roughly about $8,500. That would give us a tax receipt where each citizen would be able to go in and put in their taxes and see exactly how their money is spent based on their income. It gives us an interactive mode where citizens could communicate. They would have a layer of being able to see the budget. We would have a layer, and they'd be able to communicate how they would like this for us to use it. And then, of course, it would have the overall budget online. Now, we were told, and it still stands, that we can try this free for 30 to 45 days. And an added incentive is now they will even supply us with a person from their staff to come in and work with, be it our intern or someone from the finance department, to input all the information. So the risk factor for us financially, there is none. We'd have a chance to be able to test it and see if we like it. and they're offering a person to come in and give us 10 hours time to input it. And if you remember, it doesn't take that long to input the information. With us being on open checkbook, and with us just now going through the budget process, it would be an easier inputting the information into the software program. So the risk factor financially isn't there. We'd be able to test it before we buy it. And they would provide us with the on-site technical support to input the information. So, thank you.
Questions or comments? I know your concern was that there's no time left on your staff, so.
The Finance Department would not be able to help enter the data. I mean, we actually are using Open Checkbook that provides a lot of the same information, and Open Checkbook is currently not utilized by anybody. And I guess my one additional comment was, I guess when we introduced the budget 2 weeks ago, council and everyone was very concerned because our budget was out of balance. So this would add an item to our 18 budget that was not budgeted.
Other questions or comments? Committee members, council people in the chambers?
Let me, Mr.
Ms.
Chair,
Amobian?
we had set aside how much for city council's budget last year? Was it about 40,000 or something like that, Mr. Frickin?
Are you referring to the My Neighborhood Our Akron program or
No,
something
just
specific?
the city council budget. And I don't know if those funds are just designated for travel or whatever, or trainings. But if we wanted to take money from that budget, if we wanted to, that would be up to our discretion to do that.
If you wanted to reallocate funds that you had, yes, that would be council, president.
So, right. And that's something that we could probably just discuss at our retreat or at whatever point we could talk about. Because if you're talking about a tool that we can use to better understand how to do the budget, and I don't know if anything like this is connected with the checkbook that the state provides or not. You know, it could be a way to reallocate money that we already have in our own budget, provided we have enough support of folks that are interested in wanting to learn more about that.
Just a reminder to everyone, too, we have Mr. Lyons that we're going to be meeting today, I think at 4:15. Yeah, so I think what I hear you saying is, if this is a project, this is council's project.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's for. Is it not what it's for? It's for us to learn how to, go ahead, Mr. Neal, maybe.
Yes.
It's to empower us to.
Well, I'm somewhat disturbed by the comment. The law department, I'm just going to use an example. They study case law. They have a software program that they use to be able to do their job. This is a tool for council to be able to do its job and manage the city's resources. And to hear that don't have time to put in the information or won't put in the information, I mean, the company is going to provide us someone to put it in. We sit here and we can't even, can somebody tell me what happened with the, we've allocated $100,000 every year to the My Neighborhood Our Akron City Council grant, the only program that invests, that gives us a chance to work with our residents and invest in the neighborhood. We've only spent about $50,000 of that. Can someone on council tell me what happened to the other $250,000? And here we are the overseers of the city's budget. This tool would give us the ability to understand when that money is not spent, how we can reappropriate it to the benefit of our citizens. I mean, we got new iPads here. Can you imagine the technical department of the city saying, well, we don't have time to install the software, so no, we're not going to install the software so that you can use your iPads. This is a tool for council so that we can do our job. And then we're told that not going to assist us?
Again, I
with any
said we
information?
don't have time in our work plan this year. This is something that we did not plan on doing.
We talked about this in July, and we said that we would do it at this time. In July, we talked about this. We had the, we can pull the tape.
No, I'm aware, we talked about this. I've seen the package, I think it's good, I think I could show my constituents, help them understand a little bit better about the budget. I've had, and I don't think we have anyone from law, do we have someone from law here today? I have a concern about at what point does this council, do we have the ability to say, hey, administration, you are going to use this? Because I don't want to see an 8,000, and I don't, Mr. Neal, I like the package, but I just want to make sure if we're making the $8,000 investment that it's going to be utilized. It sounds like right now it would maybe be utilized by council. Mr. Fusco?
It just not, no, just got, as Mr. Logan said, we got to find money. That's the other, there's two pieces. Number one, we got to find money. And number two, staff time.
Yeah. So, did you understand kind of the comments that I was making? I mean, we can pass this. I think we can pass it, we can buy it. I don't think legislatively we have the power or the ability to say, now you are going to use it.
That would be correct.
Okay. Okay, but if it's something where the council would choose to say, look, we're going to take this upon ourselves, we're going to incur the costs for this, that's a different issue.
Now, that is a different, if you don't mind, with all respect. Then I think we've got to consult with the law department to ensure that we get the lowest and best bid on something like this, as opposed to just awarding.
It's a sole provider.
It's probably sole
Yeah.
source, isn't it?
Is it a sole? Oh, I thought we had something similar from the state.
No,
Is it
this says in the legislation is a sole.
sole source?
Okay, Ms. Amobian?
I can't imagine the mayor not wanting to work with us on a tool that we want to learn to use to work together on giving more information to the citizens. So if we approve this, I would imagine that somebody will find time to help us figure out how we do it. You know, whether we have to give somebody overtime, whatever the case may be. If we need the assistance of somebody in the finance department, I just can't imagine us not being able to work with the mayor and his staff to figure out how we do it. You know, the time that we take for a retreat, I mean, we spend like a whole day on a Saturday or half a day, you know, hearing from different departments. So I can't imagine we're not being able to get that kind of assistance. So.
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion? Second. Have a motion, a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, we have one no, and we will bring that this evening before council as a whole. I think we are, Madam President, we are challenged, though, to look at our budget and to say, where will this come from?
Yeah, and just to let you know, in terms of city council's budget, you know, we've already sat down, you know, so we've made no room or appropriation to do anything in addition to what we presented, so just need to kind of keep that in mind.
But if appropriations did, it's going to come from somewhere. It's either going to come from
gotta come from
salaries,
somewhere.
or it's going to come from travel money, or it'll come from somewhere.
That's
Okay?
right.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, can I back up, do a roll
Yes.
call for that last
Oh,
vote?
yes, please.
Freeman?
Aye.
Milkovich? Aye. Hoke? No. Amobian? Okay, thank you.
Madam President, just to one point, council agreed to sit down and discuss about the, our neighborhood, our Akron grant dollars, because again, we didn't, you asked if we would reduce them to 40,000, so that's $60,000 that's going where? Because we still don't know what happened to the 250. So I understand what you're saying, we may have discussed the budget, but we did not agree on that My Neighborhood, Our Akron piece. We were supposed to discuss that, so just want to make that.
Anything else to come before us?
I just want one quick question.
Yes, Mr. Fusco.
If we could, before we vote tonight, try to find out what the cost is going to be the second year. That's all.
Okay, very good, thank you. If there's nothing else to come before us, we will adjourn, thank you. And we would remind everyone, over in, which room are we meeting in?
Number 1.
Okay, conference room 1, we'll be meeting in just a couple minutes.